During 2025, I've read lots of books, listened to tons of podcasts, and talked to numerous people. Here were some of our biggest takeaways and money lessons in 2025. Hello, and welcome to the Wealth Minded Empty podcast with your money best friends. I'm Dr. Alicia Taylor.
And I'm Dr. Brittany Halford.
And of course, we're here to help you build wealth and make good money decisions so you can create the life you desire with more control over your time.
Before we dive into the episode, I want to take a moment to highlight a financial planning company that really impressed me. Bonafide Finance. Alicia and I recently met with the founder, Ben Martnick, and let me tell you, his approach to financial planning is different in all the right ways.
That's right. Ben doesn't just want to grow your money. Him and his team want to make sure that your investments actually align with your life goals. And as if that wasn't enough, Ben and his team are not only certified financial planners, but they're also some of the smartest people I've met. He is the go-to for student loan strategy and tax planning, two areas most advisors overlook, especially for high-income earners.
Plus, he's fee only. So you always know exactly what you're paying for, and you don't have to worry about his company selling you products or charging you extra fees or commissions.
So if you want advice that's honest, strategic, and tailored to you, check out bonafidefinance.com/wealthmindedempty. Him and his team specialize in helping doctors and high-income earners build their net worth in all the right ways. Email him today at hello@bonafidefinance.com or click the link in our show notes. Don't forget to tell him we sent you. All right, Brittany, this episode, I believe, is coming out on Christmas Eve. So Merry Christmas to all who celebrate. Brittany, what is going on over there for you? I know we're recording this a little early, but if you could take a peek into the future, what do you anticipate this day being like for you and Christmas being like for you?
So this is how it usually happens. We are at my mother's house in Michigan, the home that I grew up in since the age of 7. We all have our Christmas pajamas on, and KJ wakes up first because he's my early bird, and he's like, oh, it's Christmas. And he sees the gifts under the Christmas tree and thinks that Santa came. And then he runs back to the room and he says, B, wake up. We have gifts. And then they run out and then we open the gifts. So that is typically how our mornings go on Christmas Day. There's a lot of celebration, the kids opening up gifts. And then after that, we'll start the festivities. What about you? What is your Christmas morning like?
Yeah, so good question. So Christmas Eve, I guess, is where the party starts, okay? Because we are having dinner Christmas Eve. We are drinking and trying to be merry. Wink, wink, if you know what that means. We are definitely having all the drinks and feeling all the vibes, okay? And usually on Christmas Eve when we get together, we are in our pajamas because it's like, okay, we don't have to change anymore before we go to bed. We're just eating and being merry and drinking, have a good time. And if you fall out, you fall out.
Sounds like that happens often on Christmas Eve.
I plead the fifth, okay? Then we wake up on Christmas morning, and usually by that time, someone has transported me back to my home. I usually will gather with my immediate family. So I'll gather with my parents, my brothers, and my sister-in-laws, and maybe even my nieces and nephews, our immediate family, and we'll do kind of our little tradition, which includes opening gifts, but also includes praying and singing Christmas songs and that sort of thing, having a good breakfast. Then maybe, we'll watch some TV, watch some basketball games or football games that are on. And then Christmas evening is when we get together with my extended family and we open even more gifts and we exchange stockings and there's a whole other party that happens Christmas night.
It sounds so involved. Like, who is cooking Christmas breakfast? On Christmas, after I've cooked Christmas dinner, it's like, you fend for yourself. Go get some cereal, a granola bar. So I am not cooking for you. I am done with the cooking.
Yeah, so, okay, good observation, I should say. On Christmas Eve, we will usually order pizza or somebody will cook like chili or something that is not too involved. Christmas morning, we're each with our immediate families. And so my mom might cook a breakfast. And then Christmas evening, we usually will rotate, and there's a set of aunts that will do most of the Christmas evening cooking. So essentially, we have different people doing different things.
I see.
She's like, it still sounds involved.
You know what? One year, I'm just coming over. I'm bringing the kiddos and I'm bringing a stocking and I am coming over with, I'm going to have Kevin bring a sweet potato pie. Brooke and I can make a sweet potato pie. And we're just going to have a, Alicia's family experience.
Save all your energy because you're going to need it.
It sounds like it. My gosh, I got a lot of food, a lot of activities.
Yes, yes. But I'm curious to hear about this sweet potato pie. And I think you mentioned in a different episode that your daughter can make this. So please enlighten us on the Brittany secret recipe for sweet potato pie. And secretly, I'm going to take notes for myself so that I can maybe learn how to cook this thing too.
So the sweet potato pie started when I was a little girl. I love sweet potato pie. It came to a point when I was in high school. I'm like, you know what? I should actually learn how to make this because my grandmother would make an entire pie every single Christmas just for me. So it's like, no, don't touch that pie. That's Brittany's pie. So then I would wake up on Thanksgiving and on Christmas and go over to my grandmother's house early so that I could practice this routine of making the sweet potato pie with her. Because I don't know how your parents cook, but my grandmother, they don't follow a recipe. They don't have a recipe. They have a list of ingredients in their heads and quantities, but they're not measuring anything. So it's like you put a little of this, you put a little of that, and then you taste it. I would be the taste tester, but then my grandmother just never approved of my taste. I'm like, oh, Granny, it tastes good. And then she would taste it. Girl, no, it doesn't. And she would dump all these other things in. So I would try to like take notes. I literally had like copious amounts of notes, but nothing is measured, right? So I'm trying to eyeball it. I have mastered the sweet potato pie now.
Mastered. Enlighten us.
So much so that last year, I don't think my grandmother cooked. And so I said, you know what? My cousins and I, we were signing up for who's going to bring what. I said, oh, I got the sweet potato pie this year. I got it. And people ate it and it was good. And so I'm passing that tradition down to Brooke to make the sweet potato pie. And we make them typically for Christmas and for Thanksgiving. And we have one neighbor at the condo that we used to live at. And we would always take her a piece of sweet potato pie. So it's one of kind of those fond memories that I have just because it's a shared memory and an event with my grandmother. And I'm hopeful that Brooke can continue to pass down the family recipe.
All right. Well, are you going to share it? Can we get the link in the show notes for those of us who didn't watch our grandmothers make sweet potato pie? I know some people are thinking sweet potato. Well, what about pumpkin pie? You know?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you have recipes for both. Inquiring minds might want to know.
I've never made a pumpkin pie, so I only make sweet potato pie. I'm not going to share the family secret on the podcast. I'm sorry, Alicia.
Oh, well, I'm going to get it offline, but I'm excited. We'll talk offline, Brittany. We'll talk offline. All right. Well, hopefully you all are spending the day with your families and maybe you have a few minutes to spare and are willing to listen to us. And if so, we thought it would be cool to kind of talk about some of our reflections and money lessons in 2025. Mainly mine, but Brittany's going to give her 2 cents, 5 cents, 10 cents, however it's called. So one of the things that I do is I read a lot of books. I can nerd out that way. It's pretty calming for me. And so most days out of the week, I will wake up early, read a devotional, and then read part of a book. And if I'm not too busy, sometimes I will read part of a book before I go to sleep as sort of a wind down routine. So with that being said, I have read quite a few books this year. Also listened to tons of podcasts when I'm driving. I'd like to talk to people about money and life and different lessons that they have learned. There are some points that kind of kept coming back up throughout the year that I figured I might share on the podcast just in case other people might find them enlightening as well. And so I am excited. Let's kind of dive into this. Brittany, are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. So point number one that I've kind of learned throughout the year that has been resignated in different forms, whether it's podcast, books, or just conversations with people, is to stop judging other people, specifically in the way that they spend money. I think that it can be very easy. I don't know about others, so I will just talk about myself, right? To see somebody spend money on a particular item or thing or experience or trip or whatever it is and say, oh my goodness, I can't believe that they spent X amount of dollars on that, right? I can't believe that they spent that much money on a car, on a house, on a sweater, on a pair of shoes, on a trip or whatever. And one of the things that I have learned is to stop judging other people because their behavior, including the way that they spend money, all can make sense with enough information. And that oftentimes when you are disagreeing with somebody about something, oftentimes it's people with different experiences that are just sharing their own opinion based on their own unique experiences that they've gone through. And so I sort of learned that people have different priorities and backgrounds and values and sources of joy and goals and timelines. All of these unique experiences kind of shape how they spend their time, also how they spend their money. One of the things that I've always wondered is sometimes I will look at somebody and see, how much they spent on something and it's it's like, wow, that's a lot of money that you spent on this certain thing. It seems like maybe you bought it to show off to other people. And even then, I've had to kind of check myself recently and saying, you know what, that's okay. Again, people come from different backgrounds and experiences, and they get pleasure in spending their money maybe in different ways than I find pleasure. I was reading a book one time and it said, there's a quote, and I can't remember who said it, but the quote was that usually the more somebody was snubbed when they were poor, the more they were made fun of, the more they felt less than compared to other people, the more they actually enjoy displaying their wealth. And that for them, doing so can really be a source of pride and fulfillment in a way that it might not be for me. For example, I don't really care that much about cars. When I was growing up, I wasn't really snubbed for not having a good enough car. And so for me right now, buying a really nice, luxurious car doesn't, I guess I can't say it doesn't add any value to my life because I haven't bought it, but I don't think it would add that much value to my life. And so for me, it's not really something that I prioritize versus somebody else maybe driving in a better car that is more comfortable, that gives them a smoother ride. Maybe that does give them so much more pleasure and joy. And that's something that they really value and prioritize. And so, Brittany, I don't know if you've had any experience with this, but one of my main points is to stop judging other people and the way that they spend their money.
Alicia, I like this point, and I really appreciate this point for you. I think
Wait, hold on. That came out real. I was going to let it slide. And then I was like, I feel like I just caught a stray. And I just was like, it was hard to just.
no. What I'm saying is like there has been an evolution, at least that I've witnessed with even your behaviors. You know, we've talked a lot this year on this podcast of how you've traveled and when you went on your cousins' trips, how they were spending money, purchasing bags, and how that moment gave you joy. You mentioned that it's a little bit cheaper where we were opposed to if we were to purchase it in the United States. But even with that purchase, I feel like you gave yourself a lot of latitude and you also gave your cousins latitude and freedom to make those purchases and not to be judged. I say that because you are in some ways frugal, but then you have the things that you really like to spend on. I think I am very similar. I am overall very frugal. Brand names never matter to me. And they had maybe when I was in high school with like Coach belts and Jordans, but that's about it. Like I can't remember ever really having to wear labels and brands of that nature, especially into my full adult life. As you all know, I will accept somebody's hand-me-downs and I will wear them with pride. And while I make a lot of frugal decisions, I have been found to maybe not judge verbally, but people feel the judgment sometimes on some of the purchases and the decisions that they might make. But as a financial coach, you know, one of the things that I've had to learn to do is like, I can't judge people because as you mentioned, it's based upon their own experiences. And so if you were someone who grew up deprived and never had this thing and now you can afford it, then yeah, if you want to give that to yourself as a reward, celebration for making it or whatever the reason is, you don't have to justify that with me or with anyone else because as much as we work hard to earn our money, I think we should be able to spend it with freedom without guilt. So I think that this is a really great point and something that is extremely helpful when you become partner because now my husband spends his money very differently than I spent my money. And I know early on in our marriage, we're a decade strong now, but early on in our marriage, I'm like, okay, come on, baby. Now you spending this on that. He did feel judged, you know, to be completely honest with you. But now I'm just like, okay, he spends his money, how he spends his money. And we're not wanting for anything. Like we are not sacrificing for anything. And he works really hard. So as long as we have our priorities, we have our emergency fund, we are able to pay for everything, then why not? Because you can't take it with you. So you might as well spend it on the things that add the most value to your life.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's really good advice to keep in mind for those of us who maybe are not partnered in a marriage, but maybe at some point in the future. Along the lines of not judging others, part one of that is like not judging others in the way that they spend money. But another thing that I've really tried to keep in mind is not judging others in the decisions that they make and whom they support for whatever reason. And that can take its turn in a variety of different ways. But one of the things that I've really learned this year is that incentives are very powerful and that good, honest people can end up supporting bad behavior because the incentives to play along can be really strong. When someone helps you out of a crisis, it's really hard to become disloyal to them. Oftentimes, you're going to lend them your support. And that oftentimes, if you strip somebody with good intentions of their basic necessities that can turn someone with good intentions into a desperate version of themselves that you may not notice. And that unexpected hardship can make people think and behave in ways that even they themselves could never imagine. When I keep these things in mind and I see people that have behavior that I'm thinking, how did you end up supporting this person? Or how did you end up making that bad decision? Or when I see people make mistakes, maybe in a legal manner or whatever, and you're thinking to yourself, how did you get to the point where you could ever do that? I have to remind myself that sometimes good people make bad decisions, that sometimes good people make mistakes, and that sometimes those mistakes can be made because the incentives to play along are very strong, and to not overestimate your ability to ignore those same incentives if you are in that same situation. So again, it's all about, for me, just checking myself and trying my best not to be too judgmental of the decisions that other people make.
That was a little heavy listening to. I'm gonna be
I'm
honest.
sorry, on Christmas Eve. So
Oh my gosh. I'm curious. I'm like, is this from a book? What life circumstance led you to figure this one out in 2025? But to your point, I think it just makes us think about what are some of the biases at play here? What is it that's actually impacting the decision that I'm making? And if that bias, if that incentive, if that reimbursement, whatever it is, just thinking about if that discount wasn't there, would I actually be buying this thing? Would I actually be doing this thing? It takes a deeper level of reflection and introspection to ask the questions about the decisions that we're making. Because sometimes a lot of money decisions, purchases, things, people that we support might even be out of impulse, or it might be out of this strong emotional drive, attachment, desire, guilt, whatever it is. It just makes me think, okay, let's pause. Let's explore and be curious about why we're doing what we're doing, and seeing if we would make the same decision if we had different circumstances. And sometimes you can't change your circumstances. And I think that's what you're getting to, Leisha, here. It's like those were the circumstances that kind of led you to support this person or make you feel indebted to them. But I know from speaking with others, like sometimes that feeling of indebtedness makes you regret it later on once you get a little bit more clarity and you can resolve some of the emotional attachments or strong emotions that are present. I appreciate that you're not judging people for the decisions that they're making. And I'm just wondering how we can use this reflection, understanding that how all these things play into our behaviors, and explore those behaviors a little bit more so that we can live a life without any type of regret of doing something that might not be aligned with what we would normally do.
Yeah. I mean, just to give a few examples, right? Like you mentioned, in terms of spending, if you see this very large discount on this item, then maybe the incentive to actually purchase an item that you don't need is so strong that it's hard to ignore. Another example, in terms of incentives, maybe if your social circle spends a lot of money on vacations or cars or trips, material things, maybe if your social circle is sending their kids to private schools or purchasing clothes of a certain caliber, all of a sudden you can feel less than if you don't do those same things. And so the incentive to play along can be really strong. Taking it in the realm of social circles and policies, whether it's at work or in life or in politics, sometimes you can be surprised by the policies that some people support. And again, just remembering that sometimes people support them because the incentives that they have around them to play along and support those policies are just so strong. Or maybe the incentive to speak out against something is not there as well. And so, it just really thinking about, okay, let me stop judging people again about how they could spend X amount of dollars on this thing or do that thing or support this policy or program or whatever. And again, just kind of check myself, especially when it comes to money and the way that I see people spending it. So yeah, I think that could take a lot of different turns. And so that's my first point, trying to tell myself, remind myself not to judge people so much.
All right. I'm going to try to do that too, but I'm still judging. I like in my head, I'm judging it right now.
Brittany's like, okay, so some of the things I'm still judging. Other things I can let go. Some things I'm judging. So point number 2 is minimize future regret. And I can't remember if I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I think that there is a spectrum. You have some people, which seems more like you and I, Brittany, that are really on the saver/investing side, where we tend to save and invest a good portion of our money. And you have some people that are way on the other end of the spectrum, and they're a lot more on the spending side, and they tend to spend a lot more money. And I think for each person, that optimal balance can be different. And sometimes we can lean a little bit too much on the spending side, and sometimes we can lean a little bit too much on the saving and investing side. The question that I think that can be difficult to answer for some people is, am I too far to the left or to the right? How do I know when I'm in a good balance? And I think one way to really answer that question is to try to minimize future regret. And so, what do I mean by this? If you tend to be more on the spending side, then one of the things you might have to ask yourself is, would I regret in the future not saving enough money in an emergency fund or not investing enough to be able to retire by a certain age? If you're a little bit more on the saver side, asking yourself, would I regret not having this incredible experience with my children while they're small? Would I regret not spending more time with them? Would I regret not going on this vacation or this trip or purchasing this item for them? So it's really about minimizing future regret that you may have and really kind of taking each experience as it is and doing your own evaluation for it. And also keeping in mind that the things that you might regret might change over time as you age, and that what I might regret might be vastly different from what you might regret, and vice versa. I might regret not investing enough to be able to retire by age 60 versus somebody else who really loves their job are saying, I could actually see myself in this job forever or until I'm 70. And so I wouldn't regret not investing enough to be able to retire early. Somebody else who has children that are young might say, you know what, I actually regret not working less so that I could spend more time with my children versus somebody who doesn't have children may not have that same regret. Again, as you make these decisions on, should I save this money? Should I spend this money? Am I spending too much? Am I saving too much? Really asking yourself, am I minimizing future regret that I might have by not doing this experience or by not saving or investing this amount of money?
I appreciate this approach and I appreciate the introspection that it requires because, as someone who is frugal, let me tell you people, oh my gosh, I have so many stories of how I thought I was saving money, but then I come to find out that what I lost was inconvenience. And I hated going through whatever challenge that I had to go through in order to save that amount of dollars. And so for me, it was a reflection of, okay, how much is my comfort worth? How much is my time worth? How much is my peace of mind worth? And then on the other side of that is I may have mentioned a conversation that I recently had with my husband about a time where I wanted to save some money on something. He really challenged me. He's like, Brittany, I think you're making a myopic decision just based upon money. This is an opportunity for us to create this memory with our family. And so, in order to protect that relationship, in order for us to be able to move forward as a unit, I was like, you know what? He has a good point. And I went ahead and like bought the plane tickets or whatever it was that we needed to purchase. I respected his viewpoint, but also I wanted to maintain the relationships. We've been together for a decade, so we've disagreed on a lot of stuff. But in that moment, I was like, oh, you know what? He has a valid point. Thinking about future regret, would I have regretted us getting in an argument about this thing that we have money in the bank for, like everything else is covered? Yes, I would have, because the argument would have been like more damaging than the amount of money that we had to spend on whatever it is that we were kind of disagreeing on. So I think that this is a very valid point and something that I have learned to do, but I don't always do it in real time. So if you are working through these reflections, you're like, yeah, that's me, then I also want to just give you permission to give yourself grace to know that you are doing these things. You might be judging people or you might be making decisions and then regretting them later. I've been there too. And just know that like you're still alive, you have breath in your lungs and you can continue to work towards it. And even after having that awareness, you're not going to always be right because I'm not always right. But I think that this is a really great point to consider and one that I want to continue to implement in my decision making.
Okay. All right. I like that. I like that. I hear what you said about, am I saving money in the name of comfort or convenience? That really hit home for me. I'm like, okay, I could pay the maid to come or I could just clean up after myself. But then it's like, okay, but comfort and convenience, Leisha, comfort and convenience. And I'm like, okay, I need to remind myself of this. Okay. Point number 3 is to remember the main elements of happiness. There are some people that say money doesn't buy happiness. And then there are other people that say, yes, it does. You just don't know how to spend it right. Regardless of what camp you are in, I do think that there is something to be said about the main elements of happiness, right? If you had to come up with different things that generally make people happy and weigh them, I think these things would probably be weighed a lot more heavily than money. I was reading a few books, and again, this came up over and over again about the main elements of happiness. And so, what they say is that the main elements of happiness are number 1, good health, and that is physical health and mental health. Another main element of happiness is quality relationships, whether that is with your family, with your friends, with a significant other. Another main element of happiness is reasonable living standards, right? You need enough money to be able to have a reasonable quality of life and living standard. But once you reach that threshold, then more money really has diminishing returns or can maybe not provide the level of increase in happiness that you might expect. Once you have the reasonable living standards, then it's meaningful and satisfactory work. You're doing something that makes the world a better place or other people better people. And so, whatever that might mean for you. Another main element of happiness is the ability to appreciate art and nature. Maybe you are somebody that likes to view incredible art. Maybe you're someone who likes to travel to different places, whether it's mountains or beach, and just be able to enjoy art and nature. And then the last main element of happiness is a religion or philosophy that sort of helps you deal with life's biggest problems and challenges. And so, again, good physical and mental health, quality relationships, reasonable living standards, meaningful and satisfactory work, the ability to appreciate art and nature, and religion or philosophy that sort of helps you grapple with life's biggest questions. And how, if you have those main things, you really do have a large degree of happiness. And so, just really keeping those things in mind, because I think oftentimes as high income earners, we may have a lot of those things, but we are so focused on the amount of money that we think we need that we're depriving ourselves of the happiness that we probably already have. So, point number 3 is to remember those main elements of happiness. And if there's one main element that you don't have enough of, then maybe trying to get more of that instead of always defaulting to how can I get more money?
Keep the main thing, people. This is resonating with me so much because it's interview season and interviewing the internal medicine applicants. And we've also created this council called Center for Trainee Affairs, where we're really helping residents to flourish inside and outside of medicine. And we're using a definition of flourish that is based on some literature, and this literature from the Harvard Flourishing Program. And all of these elements that you've highlighted here, Alicia, are really parts of flourishing. So we have these 6 domains of flourishing, and a lot of what you've said has overlapped. And when we think about just our ability to perform, to generate the money that we want to make, we have to ensure that all the other aspects, like if I'm sick, I'm not going to be able to see the same amount of patients. I'm not going to be able to write my notes and be as productive, right? If I'm depressed, the same thing, there's going to be dissociation. If I have poor relationships and I just finished an argument, I'm not going to be able to do the work that I want to do well. And that means I'm going to decrease the amount of income I can generate. So when you talk about keeping the main thing, I think that this is really a simple perspective that is so critical and important. And it's one that we need to highlight a little bit more because there's a significant amount of burnout, regardless of what specialty you're in, what field and what job you're in. And if you could carve out some time to send a text message or go on a date with your best friend, take a wellness walk, these things would dramatically impact your life. And they don't cost that much money, honestly. So I'm so grateful for this as a great reminder. And it just really resonates with me and say, okay, Brittany, you're doing some great work with us and residents, trying to help them flourish. Leisha approves, and hopefully all of our listeners do as well.
Yeah. So I just have to remind myself, like, Leisha, you are so blessed because talking about myself in the third person, but because, I have a lot of these elements of happiness. So just kind of realizing how blessed and how fortunate and how privileged I am to have these main elements of happiness, because a lot of people who don't have one of these elements, you have somebody who doesn't have quality relationships, or they don't have good physical health, they don't have reasonable living standards. It really can impact their entire life and take a big chunk of their happiness away. And so if you're somebody who's in this kind of position where you have a lot of these elements, just realizing how fortunate you really are. All right. Point number 4 is something that I've noticed this over the years, but it really kind of hit home this year, is that a stress-free life does have some downsides. And it's one of those things that you wouldn't think of on the surface, right? A lot of us are like, oh my gosh, if I had X amount of dollars, I would be fine. If my boss was better, or if my kids were well behaved, or if I lived in a certain house, if I had all of these things that I really wanted and I didn't have any major stressors in my life, then my life would be amazing and perfect. But one of the downsides of a stress-free life is that it can kill motivation and progress. And how oftentimes when people do not have any sort of stressors in their life, they're not as motivated to move forward, to be creative, to start businesses because they really don't have a need to. And you could take this in a variety of different ways, but I think one of the main examples of this is when kids receive an inheritance and in the realm of parenting. Oftentimes I will scroll on social media and I'll see these posts. I think I saw a post one time about a woman who mentioned that her kid was going to be a millionaire, had she had already set aside hundreds of thousands of dollars for her daughter, and she was so excited to do this. And I think part of the reason why she was so excited is because she did not have that leg up in life. And so she really had to struggle and she made it and she's extremely successful. And she was so excited to be able to give her daughter this gift. And it made me think about several of the books that I've read that sort of talked about the downsides of giving your kids a stress free life, of giving your kids too much money too soon, because it tends to ruin their ambition. And how oftentimes parents are sort of trying to grapple with this reality. It's like you want to give your child an easier life than you had, but if you make things too easy, then all of a sudden they're afraid to fail and they're afraid to try really hard. And then they don't have as much ambition and as grit as you had, which made you successful. On the other hand, if you deprive them of too many things and your kids know that you can afford it, then they start to resent you for not giving them an easy life. And so then it's sort of like, oh my goodness, which side of the pendulum do I go on? How do I provide my kids the leg up without giving them too much? And, a couple of the books that I've read really talked about how most people, not everybody, but most people really need to be driven by the fear of not making it. What makes
Mm.
them work hard in school is the fear that if I don't work hard in school, I'm not going to be able to get a good job. I'm not going to be able to afford a decent life. And that oftentimes it is really hard to understand the value of money if you never felt its scarcity. If you've never been in a position where you didn't have enough money that you thought you needed, then it's really hard to understand the value of money, right? If you've always lived this stress-free life and then somebody gives you money, oftentimes it is really hard to appreciate it. You tend to spend it on more frivolous things because you didn't quite earn it and you've never felt the power of money scarcity. And so just really kind of dealing with these things and realizing for my own self that other people grew up with more resources than I had, but that actually might have been to my advantage because it caused me to work hard and it provided grit and motivated me to kind of do these things. Other people got married in their 20s and I did not. And one of the advantages of that is that it actually motivated me to make more money and to start a business because I felt like I needed more money versus maybe if I was partnered to somebody who already brought in a source of income, I wouldn't have been as motivated to start my own business because my motivation for starting it was I need to make some more money to pay my bills. And so just understanding the downsides of a stress-free life and really looking back at my own life and saying, you know what, things that I once viewed as disadvantages might have actually been an advantage for me.
It's really interesting to hear you say that because as a parent,
You're like, I'm the parent on here. I'm the parent. How dare you give parenting advice and you don't have no kid? So let me default to the parent on the podcast.
Lisa, you just keep calling me out. This is hilarious. But it makes me think about a couple of things that have happened recently with our own children. So, we've purchased a business, we acquired a business, and in the business, there are some tasks that our kids can actually do. So, Brooke has been mostly helping. KJ, his help is infrequent and inconsistent, but when he wants to help, he's very good at it. And she's like, Mommy, I'm tired. I don't want to do this. She's 7. So technically, she doesn't have to do this. She's like, none of my other friends have a job at 7. I'm like, yeah, you're right. They probably don't. But also teaching her like anything worth having is worth working for. And there are times when mommy and daddy don't want to do something, but we do it because we want to provide you with said thing. So I'm always kind of trying to figure out how much of this message do I give her? How much of this experience do I give her? And how can you create this internal motivation to do the things that they want to do? It is challenging, and I've seen the downsides of it in some very influential families and how they provided so much for their children, and their children have not escaped some of the illnesses, some of life's challenges that face those without money. And so it's like you wanted to provide them to protect them, but did you really protect them? So that's where I'm thinking, because we have a lot and we can give whatever, but also just making them work for it. So recently the kids, I said, oh, you can spend some of your money at TJ Maxx. It's TJ Maxx, not like a traditional toy store. So things are not that expensive, but I gave them a $20 budget. And so KJ, he spent about 15 minutes like looking at every single shelf and figuring out what he wanted to purchase. And when he finally made a decision, it was like $29.99. And I had to tell KJ, I said, KJ, mommy, sorry, buddy, but this is above your budget. And he's 4, so he doesn't know what's $29.99 for $20. And so he said, B, can you help me find something that's within my budget? So now they're walking around together and she's trying to help him select a gift or a toy that is within his budget. But part of me really wanted to just pay for the doggone motorcycle that was $29.99. But I think that these are great lessons that even when we have a lot, to still put some type of restriction on it to show our children that they can have within reason. And if they want more, then it requires this additional action, as you mentioned, to kind of instill that internal motivation to keep going.
Yeah. In terms of parenting, I've heard stories of like the parents buying themselves flights in business class and making the kids sit in coach or whatever, because the parents are oftentimes like, look, I've worked hard. I want this life of luxury, but I want to make my kids know that they can't have this until they work for it. Right. And so I've seen and heard some of those stories. But then again, it's really hard to do that without making your kids resent you for not providing them the easy life that they know that you can afford. And so that oftentimes the best way to do that is to live the same standard of living that your kids are living. Right. And so it's like you all are doing this thing together. But let me not try to give parenting advice before I have a kid.
I like that. I think I'm sending Brooke and KJ to coach when we go on family vacations. Of course, when they get older enough, like middle school, yes, please. You're sitting in coach. I'm going to sit in first class.
So funny. So we will see how that goes and how your children react to that. Maybe they don't care. When you're young, you can be cramped up in a small space. It's fine. We'll see. So anyway, point number 5 is about the irony of desire and happiness and how oftentimes the key to this is low expectations, which on the surface can sound kind of bad. It's like, oh, I have to not want much in order to be happy. But, I was reading this book the other day and they talked about how a definition of happiness, at least that the author likes, is that happiness is contentment and not wanting more. And that oftentimes happiness is the gap between what your current circumstances are and what you expect or want them to be. And so the bigger of a gap there is between what you have and what you want, the bigger of a gap there is into what you have and what you expect, then the more unhappy you will be. And so they, talked about, I gave this example about how, a lot of people say that they would love to go back in time, that they don't like the way things are presently, and they would love to go back to the 1950s or the 1960s or pick some other point in time in the past, right? But when they do these studies and they compare life in these different decades to life now, every single study shows that life objectively is better now. People live in bigger houses now. They drive better cars now. They make more money now. And so then the author was kind of grappling with, why is it that people feel like they were happier back then? But objectively speaking, most people are doing substantially better now. And the reason is that back then, what they had better matched their expectations. Most people lived a middle class lifestyle. And so what they could afford with the money that they made matched what other people were buying with the money that they made. And so their expectations were lower. Their expectation of what a middle class lifestyle could be, of what life in America could be, really matched what their reality is. People drove a decent car. They lived in a decent / smallish home, but everybody did. And so they didn't have these expectations of how they thought their life could be. Versus now, there's so much income disparity that people have different expectations. They feel like they deserve a different lifestyle or a bigger home or a better car. And so because their reality doesn't match their expectations, they're not as happy. And a part of the reason why their reality doesn't match their expectations is because they see people that have more than they do. And so they're constantly trying to get that next thing. But again, happiness is contentment. And so the key is being in control of your desires, because oftentimes the more you desire, it's like you need to fulfill that desire in order to be happy. And if you're not careful, you'll constantly desire more and more and more. And so just remembering that happiness is contentment and really asking yourself and trying to be content with what you have, because if you are, then oftentimes you will be a lot happier.
So, Leisha, do you think you can be content and want more at the same time? Because I'm just thinking about our past conversation about like motivation, right? And you're like, oh, I want to make more money. So that's motivating me to go to school and get an education and do well so that I can do all the things to have better resources. But we don't want you to be pursuing those better resources or pursuing your goals and be unhappy during the pursuit.
Great question. So I do think it's possible to be content with what you have now, but still have goals for the future. And I think the question to ask yourself is, are you motivated by those goals, or are you jealous that you're not there yet? Are you envious and jealous of other people because they have the things that you want, or are you actually using it as motivation to continue to progress forward in life? And I really do think that there is a thin line between that. And for me, one of the things that I always try to do is going back to point number three is remembering those main elements of happiness and reminding myself of how blessed and privileged I am that I have a lot of those main elements and saying, you know what, I am really happy. And I've tried to do a better job of that because I think that what you speak, you tend to believe over time. And so oftentimes when my friends will ask me how I am, I will respond with some variation of, I'm doing really good and I'm just very happy. Like I just am reminded of like, wow, I am really healthy. Wow, I do have quality relationships. You know, I do meaningful work. I do have a good relationship with these people, or I do have reasonable standards of living. And so I just remind myself, and I think it helps me to be content with where I am. And then, you know, I set aside time and I make goals for where I want to be in the future. But I do think it's possible, but I think it is really hard to confer those lines, as you already alluded to.
Yeah, I like your response. I also say I'm blessed and busy, so
Yeah.
yeah.
I like that.
And what I also try to do is just to have a point of gratitude. So, like when I start to complain about a problem, one of my favorite scriptures actually is Philippians 4:6 through 9, all the way through 9. So, the first part is about do not be anxious, but then it also talks about focus on good. And if there's any good thing, then you need to speak that, like whatever is positive. So, I always remember that. Like when I'm going through a struggle, I made a wrong turn, I'm getting lost. I'm like, well, thank you God that I'm not in an accident, because maybe that's what was happening on the other side before I made that wrong turn. Like we just never know. And the alternative could be worse. And so to have a practice of gratitude helps to increase that happiness and the contentment. I think it is important that we strive, we create goals, and we are also content where we are. So one of the things that my husband really he likes to go on Zillow. It used to annoy me. I'm just gonna be honest with y'all because I'm like, we just bought this house. Shoot, I don't even have it fully decorated yet, and here we are looking on Zillow. And he's like, yes, I love our house. I want us to be able to do these things as well. So I think you can do both simultaneously and it gives you something to work towards. I love the house that we're in, but I also agree with him. Like once Brooke kicks KJ out of her room, I'm no longer going to have an office. And I like having my own space. Like I've gotten spoiled and very happy with having this office. So I think that there will be room for us to grow in the future. So I agree. There's a way that you can do both and use that as motivation, not to say, if I don't have this thing, I won't be happy. Like I am happy where I am now. And if I am able to achieve this goal, I will be happy for these reasons. Just express gratitude along the pursuit as well.
Well, on that happy note, I think that's a good way to kind of end our financial focus for the day, given that it's Christmas Eve. All right, but before we head out, it's Christmas Eve. Tell us about some of the gifts you getting people. I know we're recording this early. You might not have done your shopping yet, so
Oh, you know what? I have a good one. I have a good
okay.
one. I'm doing a little happy dance, people, because, gift giving is not my strength. I don't like giving people things that they don't use, Leisha. It just makes me feel like I wasted my money, honestly. But last year, I gave something to my mother-in-law and she was so happy. I don't know if she's used it or not, but just the phone call that I received made me feel very good about the purchase. So I purchased her a blanket with pictures of the kids. And I was like, oh, that was great. She loved it. Grandparents love seeing their grandkids. So I said, you know what? I'm going to purchase all of the grandparents' photo books with them and the grandchildren, because we take all of these pictures with our phones, right? But then they never leave our phones. We might share a few of them on social media. So I'm going to create a picture book throughout the years of Brooke and KJ with each grandparent. So my dad will have his own book. My mother will have her own book. Stepfathers, Kevin's mother and father as well. And I just figured that would be a great way to build in a lot of joy because they get to see all of these images over the years in one specific space.
Ooh, I like that. I have in the past done like the digital photo frame. So then you can just like add more photos to it. But I think there's something valuable about being able to turn the page and having something tangible that you can hold in your hand.
Yeah.
And so I really do like that idea. And I think they're going to love it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. What about you? I need to take notes for some of the other gifts that I have not purchased yet.
Well, I can't divulge too much because I might be overly optimistic. I don't know if my family's going to listen to this on Christmas Eve, but I don't want to spoil too much. But I will say, when I was in Europe, in Greece and Turkey, one of the things that I did was I went to these different like markets and they had these really unique custom made like canvas art paintings. And I walked into a store and there must have been like 1,000 of them and they were all different sizes or whatever. And I remember looking at a few of these paintings and going, oh my goodness, this would go really good in my brother's home or my other brother's home. I have two older brothers. One bought a house a couple of years ago, but they're still kind of decorating it. And the other one is planning to buy a home. And then my parents bought a new home in Atlanta maybe 3 or 4 years ago, but my dad is still decorating the basement area where the movie theater is going to be and all this stuff, or the movie room is going to be. And so anyway, I saw these different art paintings and I thought, you know what? I'm going to get each of my brothers and, my parents a unique painting that I think would go good with the aesthetic that I know that they would love. And so I got these like canvas, like art paintings, rolled them up and brought them back to America. I went to a photo frame shop and got them custom framed. There's like this bronze frame and there's this other color frame that matches the other painting. But anyway, I got them pretty large, like custom art paintings from Europe. And so got them some other stuff too, but I thought that would be a cool and unique gift that they could hang up in their home and walk by and see. Because I think one of the challenges is that when you have siblings, parents, people that already have so many things, it's like, how do you buy somebody something when they can buy it themselves? So then you got to think of like personalized gifts and unique gifts and things they wouldn't think to purchase. And so I thought, oh my goodness, this might be good for their home. So hopefully they love them.
Yay. I love purchasing art when I'm traveling. I think that it's a great way to invest back in the community. Like, usually these are local artists and it's a story. So you're creating a memory so you can share, okay, this is why I purchased this one for you and what you were doing. So I really love that. I have some artwork in our home from my travels and it's just a great memory and it makes me reflect on such a positive time. So I love that for you. And you'll have to let me know or let the people know how your family enjoyed them.
Will do. Will do. Well, hopefully you all are having a lovely time with your families. Merry Christmas to all who celebrate. We can't wait to come back to you again next week.
Hello, everybody. It's me, Brooke. I'm recording a little disclaimer for my mommy, Dr. Brittany Halford, and her friend, Dr. Lisa Taylor. Just so you know, they're not financial advisors, tax professionals, lawyers, or financial planners. Everything you hear is for education and entertainment. It's not strict financial advice, So use your best judgment, chat with a tax professional, and all those other people that you need to talk to. Thanks for tuning in today. Keep cruising on your journey to wealth and wellness. Bye-bye.